I'm very happy to host this, and thanks to Java Center who give us this fantastic premises with more fantastic equipment. So we are very happy. Now I'll tell you about Kobita. I refuse to say Kobita is an amateur naturalist. She's not.
But we are.
And then she is an independent researcher. So someone told me, I think it was Sadhana, she said that on her own she researched this particular topic that she's taking the floor to tell us today. Flora and fauna on rock. She did independent research, just going and finding out and observing and learning, and then she's come here to tell us. She's an independent researcher documenting the flora and small fauna of rocky outcrops. You know, we are famous for our outcrops. Hyderabad is the most beautiful, fantastic outcrop, and mixed deciduous forests too, in and around Hyderabad. She's happy to light the spark of curiosity and share her findings and appreciation of the natural world on walks, talks, and social media. She takes it upon herself when we go for the walk to tell everybody and draw everybody's attention to the plant or the flower or the bud. Or really, she's a fantastic teacher that way. And Kobita also guides a nature activity class along with Sadhana Ramchandar at our own Vidyaranya for, hold your breath, 2 decades now. And she's also, you'll be surprised, she's also an illustrator and worked at Titan as watch designer. Remember those when we got so fancy, the nice, they were so, just a brush stroke. I had that watch. Did you do that? Did you do that?
No, unfortunately not.
It's a beautiful brush stroke, just an S.
Yeah.
Z. I bought that watch. When they came in, they just flooded the market. And the aesthetics were fantastic. And she's an illustrator and watch designer. She's a graduate of plant sciences and she holds an MPhil in plant physiology. There you go. See the background. Flora on rocks. This is about the topic, please. The Flora on rocks, unique habitats of Hyderabad, an introduction to the flora of Hyderabad's rocky outcrops. The ways in which rocks are colonized and the exquisite adaptations of ephemeral flora to their challenging environment and spotlighting a few extraordinary species for us today. This is all Kobita. I'm just reading. Beautiful vocabulary. You're just so excited to listen to Kobita, aren't you? Yay!
Thank you.
So, welcome. Please, the floor
Thank
is
you.
all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Surekha, for asking me. And thank you, Amita, for Goethe-Zentrum. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful place to be at, always. So thanks for this opportunity. I'm happy to inform, and I hope I will not, it will not get too full of scientific terminology. Please ignore. And I hope it won't be too long either. But I really wanted to share with you, these wonderful life forms that we have, how our rocks are living, something that we don't sort of take notice of. Recreation, we admire the beauty, of these boulders and outcrops, but we somehow don't seem to think that they're living as well, and the kind of life they support. So at the end of the day, it's just substrate, yes, and all life is on substrate on this planet, but we have this very unique substrate which we tend not to think of as living. So I will try to make this simple, and you can always of course ask me questions when we finish, and I hope to keep it quick. Okay, so what we're seeing here is actually some of the ephemeral flora. The only reason I'm being specific about this is because one of my friends was trying to guess what this plant was, and it is not an alien invasive, but it's actually thick-leafed lavender, which you know, at the end of the season, end of the monsoon, in fact we get huge you know, sprays of flowers everywhere on the rocks, and it's actually gorgeous if you really have a clump. And this is somewhere, this is on sheet rock near the Musi river. Okay, so we have these fantastic forms, incredible you know, formations. You're wondering how they're standing, and you know, we're clambering all over them. This is at under the moon, Yadgar Palli, which we were at recently. Very hot, very hot. We were all parched at the end of this, but it was absolutely brilliant seeing these formations. As you can see, precariously balanced. So how do they form? So they are our geological heritage. 2.5 billion years old. Not too many people take note of that. They're not cognizant of this thing, you know. The numbers are just way beyond what one can imagine, because the Himalayas are only 65 million years old, right? They were formed when the Indian landmass met Eurasia. So 65 million years ago, and even the Grand Canyon is only some 1800 million years old. So here we have what we call the Archean rocks, which are, you know, mostly granite, but of course, you know, we have feldspar and biotite and all sorts of other embedded you know, minerals in it, but basically we have Archean granite. And these are very tough, not easily eroded, but at the same time weathering has of the soft material around them has you know, brought out the harder boulders, which now stand in fantastic forms. And they have different terminology, like they called tors, which are the, you know, piles of boulders which is very typical of Hyderabad. Then of course we have also sheet rock, which can be covered with gravel. Sheet rock is just large expanses of rock, huge expanses of rock, underlying rock, and you can have boulders on top of that. And then of course we have the Inselbergs, which are, you know, like Molali or Bongir. You have these sudden outcrop of a huge single domed rock, you know, standing out. So we'll see some of these as we go along. So life on rocks is everywhere. We sort of don't pay too much attention to it, but why in Hyderabad? So Hyderabad has not had any land altering events in geological history, so it's been kind of stable. We are smack in the center of the peninsular India, and we don't have major landslides, we don't have tsunamis, we don't have earthquakes, major earthquakes. So a stable region allows for evolution, adaptive evolution. So slowly over millennia, over thousands of years, you know, life can adapt, evolve and occupy all the niches. And during the monsoons, that's the best time to see how it can occupy every niche, right? So you have chasmophytes like that bristly heliotrope occupying every, so all the cracks are highlighted by the plants growing on the rock. That's a big sheetrock with a lot of cracks in it. And then you have these mat forming small plants. They can be mosses, and then also these like the dew flowers, which form on very thin soil. It's like almost a few centimeters thick. And again, we have hydrophytes, many varieties in all the little rock pools, small and big. We have very small ones which are ephemeral, which will last for 5 days maybe if there's no continuous rain. Or you can have little, larger pond-like places which will hold water through the monsoon, and maybe a little bit of water even during the dry season. And then of course, this is a lovely little phenomenon we see. There's a little circle or collar of vegetation growing around the boulders, and also the little cushions of plants, which those areas are called pans. They're little depressions in the rock. So this is where the organic material settles. So that's where you find the vegetation. The rest of the rock will be bare. So how does life begin on rock? What does it take? So you have pioneering species who must first make the place habitable for successive species to colonize. And how do they do that? So at first we have what is not a plant. They're lichens or lichens, you can call them either ways. So they're a symbiotic relationship between fungus and an alga, where the alga is housed in the fungus gives the structural environment, and the alga actually makes the food for both organisms. So we have various kinds, but the most common on the rocks is the crustose lichen. They come in different colors. So mild acidic effect, they can grow literally using nutrients out of thin air, right? And then slowly as they dry in the very dry months, and then as they grow in the wet months or the more moist times, they actually form some amount of debris. They actually disintegrate the rock a little bit. They weather it away basically, little at a time. It's a very gentle chemical weathering, and that forms soil. It breaks the rock down, forms soil. Then we have the liverworts. Basic botany in school, biology in school, maybe some of these words will come back to you, terminologies. So liverworts are always very fascinating. They're just this single-celled, they don't have vascular tissue. So they absorb directly into, they absorb moisture and nutrients directly into the body. So they form mats. In our region, or at least on rocks, you always find the flat, liverworts. And then we have the mosses, the next group, and they also form mats, and they can, these are the spore producing structures, spore heads, and that helps actually in identifying these mosses. So they grow in the wet season, then they produce their spores, put them into the soil, and then they die out so that the next generation can come back in the next year. So the monsoon magic, which is just amazing. You should see the transformation. Seemingly dry little patch, a pan, suddenly erupts in a little cushion of a mix of vegetation. So it's amazing to see, and very typical of the monsoon months. And this will start by June. If we get some good showers, they will start, because they're all oriented towards that. One is the moisture is required. Secondly, it's the light. They measure the light, the night length. Okay, yeah. They can measure the night length, and that is their trigger to start growing the seeds, right? So it's two things. So one is the trigger sets it off, both the moisture and the night length. And then if the monsoon kind of halts, is what we are seeing now in climate change, then you can have a problem, because then they're stressed. And they can die out sometimes. Some of them are better adapted to to surviving that dry period, 15 days of no water at all, moisture and heat of the summer, but some of them will die out. So we have issues of, when we have climate change affecting our, rainfall patterns. This is a very real problem, because you could even run out of seed after several years of this happening. You can run out of seed because they die out before the seed is formed, right? So here we have cushions, and then we have carpets. So this is Euploca strigosa, bristly heliotrope. We have carpets on sandy soil, thin layers of sandy soil on the rock. You know very well that there's some amount of rock, stone underneath, but if you just put your finger in, you'll see soil, but sandy. And then you have little pockets of color, right? Tiny flowers. There's a little bit of wetness over here. It's actually water which is running down the rock surface. It's running away, it's flowing, and then you have small patch of very thin soil. It requires that running water, and that's where this particular plant and some of its associates, that's where they thrive and bloom. This is Alicicarpus. Okay. Oops. So have you ever wondered about the harsh conditions on rock? The picture itself will give you a kind of feeling for what the conditions must be like. So the temperatures are extreme. In a single day, you can have a 20-degree fluctuation in temperature from midday to midnight or early hours. And then seasonality, right? You have 5 months of wet, and you have the rest of the months you have either cool dry or you have hot dry. And then you have the wind factor. Luckily not that much over here because we don't have sandy shores, but there's still quite a bit of wind, and that can be very dehydrating. That is the problem here. Wind does that. And of course very poor soil because it's just forming, and this is granite. It degrades very slowly. It has less nutrients in it as compared to basalt perhaps, or even limestone. But the conditions are different, yeah. The nutrient composition is different, but it's poor soil nevertheless. pH also very different from irregular garden soil. So how do these plants deal with this? So clearly they have, there are strategies. Adaptive evolution is what we call them. They have evolved over time, and each has its own niche, each does its own thing. And I'm just picking out 5 of them to quickly tell you that these are the kind of adaptations that they have. They're quite interesting to see how they can combat these conditions that they face. So ephemeral means short-lived, and then we have desiccation tolerant, which means they can die out but they can come back, sort of rejuvenate. Then there's succulents, so they can store water. Geophytes are those that have an underground storage organ. It can be a bulb or a corm or a tuber, but yeah, they have underground storage organs which hold water and nutrients. And carnivory, yes, poor soils I mentioned, if you remember, so they have to supplement. There are those plants that grow in particular niches which then need to supplement their food with especially nitrogen, because that's easily taken away through flowing water, so they need that. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so the ephemerals. So here we have thick leaf lavender, which grows towards the latter half of the season, and very typically they grow at the base of rocks, at the base of boulders, or in little pans, depressions, where in the center, they'll grow in the center because they prefer a little more soil, right? Because they're taller plants, they can get up to 2 feet in height, and they profusely flower, which means they will set seed in millions, right? They're tiny seed. So these ephemerals, they grow quickly. In their period of time, they grow quickly and they will set seed and they will die. They will die out completely. So the new seed will generate the next season. Then we have desiccation tolerance. You've all heard of Sanjeevani. They grow on rock. This particular Selagina bryopteris grows on rock, and which is why, if you remember, Hanuman is carrying a mountain, right? So I think humans like to project the what they see, what the plant does. They like to project that onto their properties, and they say, oh, this can rejuvenate, and therefore most probably it can save lives, but it's not been proven. So please don't go around consuming Sanjeevani. I have no idea, but yes, it is medicinal. Of course, it has metabolites which can be extracted. They're all chemicals at the end of the day, so they can be used in various medicinal uses. Okay, so they soak in the water, they unfurl, as you can see in the first picture. Oops, sorry, I need to get the hang of this. And then when the rains stop, in that 15-day break, they will curl up like this, and they look like nodules on the ground, just like pebbles. And this is what the close-up is like this. So very protective. Okay, the underside is light colored. It keeps its chlorophyll, but it's completely protected because of the way in which the folding happens. Actually, it's kind of a spiral folding, and the center of it folds over the center of the plant, so that growing point is also protected, right? So this is Selaginella, and a lot of this is sold in the markets during the monsoon because it's such an interesting plant. I mean, they'll have this curled up dried bits, in a basket, and they'll have one little thing stuck in a bottle or a cup or something, and it's green, and they will show you. I mean, if you care to stand for a little while, in a couple of hours, they're back green and photosynthesizing, in fact, right? And the third strategy is succulents. So what happens here is there are very tiny leaves which occur at the growing tips, very tiny, and they drop off very soon. So what is the problem with leaves? If you have leaves, you will transpire. Yes, as you photosynthesize, plants transpire. Basically, transpiration is loss of water. So you do away with the leaves. So how do they exist? Their stems are all green, so they can photosynthesize using their stems. So there's chlorophyll there. Yes, and they have the most interesting flowers with little fringe like this, which flutters in the wind, and the color is very distinctive. It has this very flesh type of color. It has an unpleasant odor which attracts flies. Yeah, so this is fly pollinated. Caralluma. This is also eaten, by the way. It's considered a good snack if you're out in the field, but we're fast losing these patches. They're very small plants. You can see my finger there for reference, size reference. Okay. And 4, geophytes. Now this is an interesting plant. I always champion it because it is found, so far has been reported only from Hyderabad, Ledoboria hydrabadensis. That is why. It has a bulb by which it lives underground, and with the rains, this is one of the first plants to emerge actually. So in June, this is what you'll see. By the time the thick leaf lavender comes, this is gone. So it again flowers profusely, very beautiful inflorescence, and a lot of pollinators are attracted. It sets seed and it quickly dies out from the top. The shoot, the leaf will die out. It will have set its seed, and it remains underground in these. So the seeds can grow into new plants, but this is also there. So the bulbs are also there, and we have many kinds of geophytes in our rocky outcrops, several kinds, and they are becoming rare because the bulbs are collected for medicinal purposes again, right? Most of these plants have amazing medicinal uses. So again, traditional medicine, of course. Yeah, so it's endemic, which means it's not seen elsewhere. It's endemic to Hyderabad as of now. It's not yet been reported from anywhere else. There are other Ledoborias across, even in Hyderabad, we have some in the plains or in the gravelly soil, and then we also have some in the Western Ghats. But this is our very own. And then of course carnivore, the most fascinating kinds of plants. So we have several species of carnivores. I've just picked indica to show you. So they have these stems which are modified into these curling tentacle like things, each with these little capillary hairs with the little sticky globule at the end. So they glisten in the light, in sunlight, and they actually love bright sun, and they're tiny plants. They're about 2 inches, but they can also grow given favorable conditions. Of course, they can grow like a twiner, so they grow pretty long as well. And so they glisten and they attract insects, which when they get attached, they get stuck onto this leaf, modified leaf stem, they will be digested by enzymes, yes, and absorbed into the plant tissue. So basically they're getting some of their nutrient from this. They're also green, of course, so they can photosynthesize, but they need some of the nutrients. And we have Drosera burmani also, and you must be wondering, so there are insects that come to pollinate this. Mostly the flowers are held a little away from the plant so that their pollinators don't get trapped, because then that would be, they're very clever. That would be sort of going against the whole idea. So yes, there are a lot of little crawling insects that get onto this and get stuck, but the pollinators don't. These are small insects. Okay, so that's Drosera. So those are the strategies, few of the strategies I've outlined. They also do things like, having, the entire leaf and stem covered with white hairs, which can reflect UV. So, and also keep the moisture in, avoid desiccation. So all these things, and there are many more adaptations that happen. What I also wanted to point out was, normally our rocky outcrops are associated with some kind of a water body. They may be perennial or they may be seasonal. They could dry up. So this is at Yadgarpalli, UTM, and there's a lake over there, pretty large piece of water over there actually. And this is a huge, it's almost like an Inselberg. It's a low Inselberg, massive rock, one single huge rock, which runs sort of horizontally to the ground, and then of course then you have the associated outcrops. This is actually the outcrop which you saw in the second slide. We went around and then we saw that. So this is pretty much what it looks like in March, partly dry, just about waking up, and these water bodies give a huge boost to the life around them. Okay, so in this little lake, which is dry now, it looks like this now. This is in Ghare Mubarak. Normally it can fill. You can see sometimes the water line is up here. Okay, that's where the water line is. In the monsoon it can be up there. I've actually walked across also. Sometimes it's that dry, but amazing creatures live here. There is a family of little grebes that lives here year round. I have seen 4 snipes, common snipes. Then you get common sandpipers, green sandpipers. There's a pair of, at least one pair of shikras who live here, and a whole lot of lapwings and egrets visit, storks, cormorants. It's a small little place. And then I have seen keelbacks in the water, yes, and mongoose around, water hens. It's an amazing, sometimes we get the avadavats, red avadavats here, red munias as well. So just a little patch, and that's more than enough. The thing is to keep that from getting polluted. It's a very clear little patch. As yet, there's no sewage coming into it, nothing. It's just rainwater. So we have lilies blooming, all sorts of things. A little, but it's a little jewel there amidst the rocks. Oops, sorry. Okay. So being a semi-arid region, we actually have a lot of plant groups represented on our rocks. Okay, so this can be a great place of study for students from school onwards, right? Except that, of course, we have to be mindful of how we proceed, and this, it's a short period as well. It's only those 5 months when we have the rains. The rest of the time they dry. Some of them may still be there, but you won't be able to recognize them maybe. So we start with the lichens, and then we move to liverworts. So these are all the spore producing plant groups. Yeah, we have the liverworts, we have mosses, and this is a specific kind of moss we find in some areas. They call silver tips. It's very beautiful moss. Then we have club mosses, which are again Bryopteris, Selaginella or Sanjeevani, and then we have actually about 3 to 4 species of ferns, and this is one of our best desiccation tolerant ferns. It's called the ray fern, Actinopteris, and very beautiful. You'll see them all the time when you go on a drive in the in the Western Ghats. You'll see them along the rocky hillsides. But for us, we'll see them at their best during the rainy season, and the rest of the time they're kind of a little dried up and nudged inside a little crevice, waiting the rains. So they dry up and just wait. So here are some seed producing plant groups. I don't want to, I'm sure I'm already sort of boring you, but I can't help but showcase some of these plants which are very special. And we don't normally see them unless we take a close look, because they're all small. Okay, so these are herbaceous plants, some of them which we have, and that's this is a fantastic. It's always botanists love these plants. This is a Ceropegia spiralis, which we were very lucky to find on one rocky outcrop. It's a sheetrock area, and there are quite a few there. I haven't seen them, but I think Professor Siddharthan has seen them in University of Hyderabad. Yeah, and then there is this which I found, and I confirm this is the Lalji's table rose. There's no common name, so I've just put it there because it's Portulaca lalji, and it has been described from the Eastern Ghats. And it's actually lurking around on our rocky outcrops, and people don't know that, right? So you take a close look. There are characteristics which are slightly different, and then you find, oh, we have this. So we do have plants from Western Ghats and from the Eastern Ghats which show up over here, right? We always think that those are the hot spots, and oh, we don't have much. This again is a little beauty which we don't get to see. This is Govindappa's Indian squill. Again, I've given it that common name. This is Drimia govindappe. They're bulbs. They're actually big, and different varieties you get on our rocky outcrops. You'll see the leaf stage. It's very difficult to see them in bloom because we always miss it. The leaves die out by September, very quickly. September, October, the leaves have gone, and what is remaining is the bulb. And if you check any of the building sites, you'll sometimes see these been unearthed by the earth movers. You'll see these big bulbs, but otherwise you can miss them altogether. And they start blooming now, where you have no evidence of the plant underneath. Suddenly one shoot will come up, and those flowers are tiny. They're the size of smaller than neem flowers, but spectacular when you see them. And they open at around sunset, and then they close by the morning. So this stalk will be out for about 3 days, and then it's gone. So if you haven't reached there on time to see it, you don't know it's there until you see a few leaves, but that's it. And this is a very lovely plant again, ascending dewgrass. We see various species. Most commonly, there's another one which we see, fasciculata. This one is always on the rocks. Okay, and so those are the herbs. Then we have the shrubs. Some of you may have seen them. They're very typical of our rocks. For example, this Barlaria, which is December. Most people know it as December because they bloom in December, and they make garlands and you wear it in your hair. But this is the longiflora which we have on our rocks, doesn't grow on the plains at all, on lower ground, only on the rocks. Then we have the Indian pavetta, a very beautiful shrub. This one, Indian kadaba, lovely orchid looking tiny small flowers. And of course torchwood, all those who go to walk in KBR are have been assailed by its fragrance. I think every year Ashish never fails to remind me, the blooming. So this is a wonderful ixora. I think we should all be growing it in our gardens. Very hardy. Yeah. And then we have climbers. I've just picked a few which we see, which they're evident when we walk somewhere by the rocks, or we walk in KBR, the rocky area. We see these, right? So it really catches your eye. Children especially, see that, those little seeds with the black spot, they're also called crab eye, beans. And then we have this, which is endemic and extremely endangered. Tiny little flowers, again smaller than a neem flower, but very beautiful, as you can see from that structure. So this, the root or all parts of the plant are medicinal, and they've been, sort of collected a lot in the wild, and therefore being lost quite quickly. This is more common. It's very thorny, but has these spectacular little winged seeds. These are samaras, each of them. It's a seed with a little wing on it, and looks fabulous against the light. We see a lot of this, the thorny, very thorny climbing shrub. And then again we have Comretum, which is bush willow. We see a lot of this, especially when it's fruiting or even flowering, flowers and fruits profusely. These are winged seeds. They roll around in the wind to get dispersed. So again, endemic to India. Trees, I just thought that, I should not avoid talking about the trees, though they are not, they are adapted to these conditions, but not the kind of adaptations that we have seen of the small flora, right, earlier. But these trees, one of the main adaptations is to lose their leaves. Yeah, all our trees are deciduous, especially the ones on the rocks. They will lose their leaves in the dry season, so starting October sometimes or November, and then they will start blooming in early in the year, around February, March, even now April. So this is actually a very beautiful tree right here, blooming just now. The ghost tree, this is Gum Karaya, very well known as the ghost tree in especially central India. It's much loved by all botanists and other nature enthusiasts because it gleams in the dark. It loses its off-white reddish tinted bark very soon, and then it stands out white, especially in moonlit nights in the jungle. So they're called ghost trees. So we have our very own, very old, actually this is quite a heritage tree, I think. It's in Ghare Mubarak. Those are the pods, very prickly, tiny pods, but they are the ones which are more colorful. The flowers are actually very tiny and nondescript. So this is our favorite. We see a lot of these very typically on the rocks. This is the Krishna Cirrus. Then of course the sweet Indrajao right here. And then the soft fig, which drapes itself on the rocks. Very typical growth of the soft fig. It's got these very hairy, fuzzy little figs. Fantastic to see these trees growing on our rocks. So we've done all the seed producing plants, and okay, we've got grasses. Just wanted you to see them. I don't know whether this is indicative to you of the beauty of these grasses, but you should see them, in their full form, and they, start blooming. They start flowering in, towards the end of the monsoons, and that's the best time to catch them. So September, October is just fantastic. We have some very beautiful species, some of them, endemic to the country. And this particular one, we have it here in South India, Oropetium villosulum, which is, there is another desiccation tolerant grass, which we have as well, but it's across the subcontinent. This particular one is South India. Again, it's a very small grass on the rocks. It can dry up completely and come back to life. Again, you know, in periods of no rain. This, of course, is a very typical grass which you will see in clumps like this on the rocks. Cymbopogon coloratus, it's related to lemon grass. Yeah. So if you crush this leaf, you will get a turpentine kind of smell. But very beautiful grass when it colonizes the rocks. Okay, so just one interaction in detail. This is a plant which is a creeper, climber, which we find on the rocks. I'll tell you why. Because the first time I noticed, what did I notice? I saw the caterpillar crawling quickly on the rock, along the rock, and I wondered what was going on because I couldn't see the plant anywhere. And so this is a thing that you should look out for when you're on the rocks, especially during the early part of the monsoon. You will invariably see these caterpillars crawling quickly around. When they are mature and ready to pupate, they have to find another place to go and make the pupa. So you will see them traveling on the rock. And then maybe if you can follow or look around you, you may come across this very fancy, amazing little plant which is called Dutchman's pipe. It's only because of the shape of that, you know, little curve like this. So it has a very interesting mechanism of pollination. Again, flies, you can see the color. This is indicative of the creature that pollinates it. This is a little tube, and that is where the pollinating the organs are, right? So the fly drops into this and gets to this section and whizzes around there. Sometimes it's trapped in there for a couple of days more till the flower is pollinated. So the flower is like this, and then by the end of it, when it's finished pollination, it turns down. So then the fly can escape. Fly can drop out, but of course this plant does kill a few flies only because the fly is unable to escape. So it kind of dies over there, which is contrary to what, you know, it wants it to do, of course, but sometimes yes, it happens. So those are a few problems they face, but otherwise, that, you know, they produce seeds copiously in a little basket shaped structure, which, you know, when shaken in the wind, the seeds all, you know, fly out. They sort of spill out and get blown by the wind. So there are two of these beautiful large butterflies which have their cats feeding on this plant, and they are so voracious. They go through the entire plant, buds, flower, everything. You just have the stem left after a point. So this is, you can see this band, so that is very distinctive of the common rose, and then this is the crimson rose. Both butterflies are showing that they are not to be preyed upon, because those colors are warning, because they have taken in from the plant aristolochine, which can be distasteful for a predator, right? So, so this is one of the associations. There are several, but I didn't want to leave the fauna out, okay? Most people are more enthused with fauna than with the flora, so I have to, you know, sort of grab your attention. This, of course, this is our, you know, mascot on the rocks, and of course the Rock Society also has the rock agama as its in its logo, but this fellow is amazing. It's got beautiful patterns, and he's a fan-throated lizard and pretty common in many of our rocky areas. But you have to look out for him because it's very well camouflaged, but to me it seems like he's very curious, because suddenly he'll come out and then he'll look. And especially when in the dry season they are courting females, and that's when they do this. They spread out their dewlap, they find a little high spot on the rock, and then they flick the dewlap open, because otherwise you can't see it, and that's to attract, literally flagging down the female. This is a very interesting little toad, the Malabar rock toad. It can only breed in the rock pools, only, and the rock pools can be small or large. one season in 2023, because of the variation in rainfall, this little rock pool, which is like the size of a size 12 shoe and about a foot deep approximately, had to go through 3 cycles of spawning, and every time the toadlets would die because the pool would dry up and the toadlets would die, and or the tadpoles would die, and then so 3 cycles, and then the 4th one was successful. So these toads, so this is a toadlet, it is in my hand, so you can see how tiny it is, very characteristic, these red spots, very sweet little, cute little guy with the snub nose. So the toads are a little larger than that, they're a little large, but they're still small toads because they live on the rocks, and they will spawn as almost with the early rains. That's their time to reproduce. They don't go late into the season. Then this Jansennia tiger beetle is actually a very beautiful beetle found only in South India, on South Indian rocky outcrops. Okay, so beautiful, they're called tiger beetles because of the speed at which they run. They're one of the fastest insects. But this guy is not too harmful. They are also known because they give you a bad bite if handled. But otherwise, they're pretty much going about their own business. But this guy, even his bite is not too bad. And this is one of the favorites, the red velvet mite, again small little fellows who like the gravelly, sandy soil of the rocky outcrops. They pretty much live underground. They only come out with the first rain. So typically, if there's been a shower the previous evening, you have to go out the next morning to catch them. Otherwise, you won't see them. So they all come out. They feed, but they come out to mate, and then they go back into their little dens underground. So very brief periods we can see them, especially just after a shower. Otherwise, they spend most of their lives underground. Then we have the antlion, which again very typical on our rocky outcrops. You see these little traps, the larval pit traps, and then you hardly ever see the adult, but if you're lucky you may see it. It's a very beautiful insect with large eyes, colored, burgundy colored eyes. But this is what is important. I think most of you know about the antlion and how they behave. The reason those, these pretty, short-lived damselfly looking creatures are called antlion, but they're not really harmful. It's their larvae who are very ferocious. No, did I say the right word? Ferocious. I'm sorry. Ferocious, so they have just mandibles and a little body. They make these pit traps, a fabulous feat of engineering, so that any ant walking across that will slide down. They don't have a foothold on this very fine sand, and that angle is very important. And the larva is hiding at the base with his mandibles. He just grabs the ant, drags it down, injects some venom in, and sucks out the digestive juices. And then he's also very house proud. He flicks the empty shell, the chitinous skeleton out, so that he's ready for the next prey. Okay, so small fauna, and then of course I didn't want to leave the birds out. So some of these birds are found elsewhere as well. For example, the ashy crowned sparrowlark, you see them in grasslands as well, but somehow the sheetrock, vast expanses of sheetrock, they're very fond of it. You'll see them in pairs. The male looks like this, little distinctive ashy crowned sparrowlark, but the female looks much like a sparrow. And they love being on the top of the rocks also because there grass is growing there. Then you have the red ram swallow, which builds its little upside down igloo, mud igloos. It's actually got a little bit of soil in its mouth going off to build its nest. So when it rains especially, you'll see them getting active because there's wet earth at the base somewhere, around the rocks and boulders, and they go and start building their nests. This is the female of the blue rock thrush. They of course love the rocky areas. Even when there is some amount of human activity, they're pretty brave, but too much of it and they vanish. Then we have the blue-faced malkoa. Of course, he lurks around belongs to the crow family, loves the scrub jungle basically, which is on the rocks. Black nape, this is a female black nape monarch. And all of these, the blue-capped rock thrush, they all enjoy these, the scrubby patches on the rocks. So that's important as well, because the rocks house those, the shrubs we saw earlier. Many of them are thorny shrubs, but all of them produce lovely fruit as well as flowers. So there's enough for pollinators, and there's enough for frugivorous creatures as well. So this is Maulali. This is the kind of Inselberg with the boulders, and as you can see, it looks like an island there in the middle of all of this urbanization. And they harbor species which many a time are not seen on the plains, right? So they, in that way at least, they increase or they boost the biodiversity of the place. And they also, of course, have a larger impact on the surrounding landscape in many ways than we can imagine or think of. Most importantly, of course, water. It filters the rocks actually. Very slowly the water runs off. You can see for at least a month post heavy rains, at least a month of long, there'll be water trickling through various cracks and crevices continuously, and the water actually either it goes off into lakes and little streams nearby, or most importantly it goes into the ground right at the base of the rock. That's where you see actually vegetation growing many a time. It circles the rock because there's moisture there. So it's important to have patches, rocky areas even in urban spaces. They provide lung, they're living things, right, and supporting many different habitats in them. They can be rock pools, and they can be grassy patches, and they can be little forests of shrubs, thorn scrub forests, all sorts of things which house different kinds of species. Okay, and across the season, those 5 months or so, all those little species which I was talking to you about, they come in, so they have, as I was saying, it's time bound, right? So they each have a time. But the kind of mixes that you see, species mixes, they change over the months. So you actually have different species coming up. So that's a lot of species then at the end of the 5 months. That's a huge boost to biodiversity as well. So here's, and this fantastic, this is a tor. So this is in Ghare Mubarak, beautiful little pile of rocks, and it takes just a few seconds to blast it off from the face of the earth. And you can never regrow, never get it back. 2,500 million years old thing gone. And what are we doing, right? Here's the patch which actually unknowingly I was so excited to see this patch of glory lilies. It was absolutely spectacular. The photo doesn't do it justice, and this was in the days when there was only one building, one housing society on the Neopolis rocks in Kokapet. And this was actually fenced in. You can see a few poles here. This was a fenced in patch, and it was almost like untouched. It belonged to the government, and it had been like that, fenced in for a long time with no grazing pressure whatsoever. So this was a little patch, and in 3 years this is what we got. This is alien invasive. This is the bush mint. It's the same patch. You can see that, you see this building there? It's the same patch, and now it's gone. It's vanished. There's a flyover that landed right there, so that's gone. Yeah. So even little bit of intervention can be so devastating for these species. They are hardy, they're very resilient to those conditions which I pointed out, but they're extremely vulnerable to even the slightest changes, right? And not knowing of their presence. So this is also actually a geophyte. It has tubers underground right? So it dies out completely and you won't find any trace of the plant. There may be something else there, but mostly you won't find any trace of the plant at all for about 5 months. And it just springs up in the monsoon and quickly flowers and profuse blooming for, several weeks, at least 3-4 weeks they'll be blooming. And it doesn't take much at all to sort of, destabilize this life form. And it's just gone. It's not going to come back ever. It needs the light. These grow fast and they sort of block out the light and they can never emerge. Okay, they can't even sense the light, right? Oops, okay. So that's my last slide, just to sort of wrap it all up. It does boost our biodiversity because we have species on the rocks that we don't see elsewhere. And the species are not restricted just to flora. They're also the fauna, the associated creatures that live on the rocks along with these. We have to count them also. And these ecosystems, of course, provide all the services that, at the end of the day, which actually help our well-being, the well-being of the environment, the ecosystem, is dependent on all the services that they provide. You can, temperature regulation, everything, all that, trees do or plants do, which we know of, done by all of these plants. And then, since they are resilient to harsh conditions, as you saw earlier, we think that, oh, maybe, nothing will happen, but no, they're very sensitive to any disturbance. Even recreational disturbances have wiped out so much now. The places that I have been, so I've been going to these places for 7 years plus, and all of the places that I visit, all of them have had some impact or the other for the worse, always, right? Even recreational impact. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see, those patches which are, the pans where the, flora will emerge in the monsoon, that's covered with broken glass, discarded clothes, bags, shoes, everything. I mean, plastic, you name it, it's all there, right? And of course, lack of information, unfortunately, which is why, we're trying desperately to spread the word, but these species are not studied as much, at least in the Western Ghats. They have been studied a little longer, but we sort of ignore them in our area because they've been labeled as wastelands. So we don't, in everybody's mind, that's what it is. And of course, we are so used to seeing large things, right? That's why I say, they're not charismatic in the traditional sense. We're so used, so we do admire the rocks, but that's about it. And of course, the, enthusiasts, adventure enthusiasts will climb it and all of that, which is fine. But if it becomes too much, the pressure of recreation also can become a problem. Like even something as innocent as rock climbing can become a problem for these areas when there's too much. So everything needs regulation. Grazing, of course, the grazing pressure is escalated like it's crazy. New patches where we see, grass still flourishing. I mean, hordes, literally, the entire area is covered with goat droppings. I mean, I was flabbergasted, really. I mean, they must have spent the night there, like literally bringing herds of them. And so they kick all this, this little bit of, in the pans, there's a little bit of this substrate, and they've kicked it all out because, of course, they're cattle, I mean, and goats, so you don't, they're just doing their thing. But they've kicked it all out. So that's gone, right? Disturbed the whole place, not just the surface, but it's all moved away. So anyway, in the face of, all these varying environmental conditions, I think these plants need to be studied, and, climate change is such a real thing. And these are so capable of, adapting and living on these, harsh areas. The only thing is, we humans, what is the role we play? We need to, get acquainted with these plants. We need to give them the attention and, as another living being, it's only then that, you know, anything is going to change, right? So thank you so much for patiently listening. I'm sorry if I bored you. But yeah, it's always my goal to sort of, even if there are a few handful of people, to tell you about these amazing organisms on the rock, to which we need to pay so much more attention. Yeah. So I hope you'll go out, you know, in the monsoon at some point and take a look at these. I'll be, you know, happy to walk you through it if possible. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, most people don't think of this at all.
Question answer session, please. Whoever.
Yes.
What types of snakes you come across in rock?
To be frank, right on the rock, nothing much, but in the pools, definitely checkered keelbacks. In the little pools and the lakes, you can. In the streams, checkered keelbacks. But I haven't. Technically, we should be able to see rock pythons, but I haven't seen them because I think they come out in the night, and I'm there early in the morning mostly. Sometimes in the evening, but they come out in the night because we find that when the area around us gets disturbed, then the pythons come into our communities, you know, they sort of exit from there. I've seen pythons again in the morning, which have been killed or something in the University of Hyderabad while I was studying there as well. Massive, huge creatures. So they are there, definitely. And we'll have crates, sand boas, and but I don't see them when I'm there, which is why I've only photographed checkered keelbacks in the water, but the others are very well hidden from view. But definitely both the vipers are there, the saw-scaled as well as the Russell's viper. Yeah. So quite a few actually. These are very typically what we see over here. Yeah, sure.
A lot of these flora, are they usually common to a large rocky area,
Mhm.
or do some of them thrive even if it's like a large lone rock? Does it have to be an area, or
Typically, it's an area. Typically, yes. It could be remnants. If you see them in a smaller patch, it could be a remnant patch where, you know, some part of it has already, you know, has undergone some other, you know, land use change, but, you know, and some little part has been left out. But yeah, normally, yeah, so that could be a remnant patch. But otherwise, normally, yeah, it's over extensive, yeah, rocky. So there's sheet rock, there are tors, there are everything happening in the same area. Yeah, that's about how I see it. Yeah, yeah. Hi.
So that previous session that we had here,
Mhm.
Outcrops, right? So and
Huh.
it turns out there is very little that we know about centipedes.
Yes.
Centipedes in Hyderabad.
Yes.
So do you get to see any of them?
Then again, yeah, so I don't disturb these rocks, but if you do actually lift them up, you are the smaller ones, in fact, you will come across some. Typically, yes, because they will be there. I mean, there are many more creatures over there, lots of reptiles, amphibians during especially that wet season, right? So you typically scorpions, centipedes, both, yeah, species will be there. Millipedes, quite a few. So we get the large, you know, the giant millipede, not typically giant, I'm just using a common name, don't want to use the, you know, scientific term, but yeah, the bigger millipedes, very common, very, yeah. Somehow, and every dry season you will find the exoskeleton of the millipede, anywhere. Snails and millipedes, and you know, in the wet season you will see them all around. So yes, millipedes. Centipedes, unless you pick up the rock, you will not see them in the daylight typically. So I don't normally disturb the rock. So I think you can also then find maybe some sand boas and things like that in some other areas. Yeah.
Couple of questions, if that's okay. Number one, is there a field guide yet?
No.
Um,
Unfortunately
number
not.
two, we talked about geophytes
Mm.
and it throws down the bulb. So when that depth happened for the bulb to go down and thrive, because it would take a long time for the rock to disintegrate and then
Yes, so even in those shallow, so what happens is the rock disintegrates, and also with the pioneering species, they start growing, right? Wherever they grow, they hold some of the debris from the air. Then when they die, some of their debris also gets added. So slowly the layer builds. And this particular plant, the Ledeboria, the bulb is about like, you know, garlic, let's say. And yeah, so typically the soil is about this much, from about an inch to a couple of inches. Even that's enough. They're even smaller sometimes, the bulbs, just about that much. And they can still grow
life
and.
of the bulb
Mm.
and the time that it takes for the depth to happen.
Imagine they're slowly colonizing. So clearly these have been sitting here for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? I mean, literally wherever you see the soil, it's clearly been formed over decades, hundreds of years, and we can just kick it off, you know, just like that. It takes time to, you know, sort of, that's the sad thing about, you know, these areas. We don't understand how long the process is actually, right? I mean, plants themselves are slow, and then geological processes are slower. So it's such a slow process, and we can just change it in seconds, right? So you're just going to lose it very fast, and the rate of change is so fast that, you know, they're not able to cope with that. They can't. If the rate of change was slow, like the past 100 years, like, you know, 1800 to 1900, that's fine. I mean, and all of these areas are secondary forests. They're not primary forests, right? So clearly people have been using these areas over hundreds of years again, right? This was where they got most of their stuff from. I mean, nowadays you can go out and buy your things, right? And you get gas, you've got everything. In those days, these were the areas, and of course the plains, where, you know, they were almost barren if you think about it, right? They're actually flourishing now, more so, because the common man has, you know, stopped going and finding fuel wood or chopping for fuel wood or gathering medicinal, you know, plants and things like that. So in some areas it's rampant still, but in Hyderabad, for example, I'm just talking about Hyderabad, you see that, you know, it's reduced. But the new normal is development. So when human forces have not, you know, have sort of reduced, grazing pressure has increased in some areas, because I think the spaces have gotten, I mean, Hyderabad has that. It's a, you know, it's an urban area which still believes in having, you know, it's got a few cultural things, yeah, traditional stuff that is required. Like, so the goats are, you know, normally grazed elsewhere in grasslands through the year. But during Bakrid, they come into the city and then they have to be housed at a particular place, right? So it's actually part of the culture and tradition to give your, if you had a piece of land, you would give it for grazing during those periods, you know, September, I mean, starting from August, late July, the herders would come from Karnataka side, you know, it was all one state, right? So they would come. So wherever the herds are, they would move. So they're on the go mostly. It's amazing how, you know, it worked. It used to work beautifully because there was a balance. There was enough, you know, and there was enough food, and there was, you know, just enough numbers of these creatures. So it worked beautifully, and they still do. You can see them. They come during the season and then they go back. So this migration happens, and little bit of grazing is important for our grasslands and savannas. It helps, it maintains the balance, no? Otherwise, you know, I don't know, the system, the balance would go a little bit. So a little bit of grazing is always good, because we don't have the grazers anymore. We don't have the natural grazers, so ठीक है, you know. But there's so much now. I mean, wherever I go, there's buffaloes. I mean, mostly buffaloes in our place. Buffaloes and sheep and goat. Yeah, a lot. Much more than the place can handle. So they're trampling everything, right? The sundews, they need light. Their seeds are in the ground, they can actually sense light. So when they sense that it's clear, that's only then they will germinate. Otherwise, they don't germinate. So there's a paper on that. I mean, they studied it, because some seeds will germinate even in the dark. Mostly we think of it that way, you know, when we tell people, hey, germinate these seeds, it's okay if it's in the dark, you know, cover it and keep and stuff like that. But some seeds can actually sense, because they need a clear space. Yeah. Insectivores do that. So we have a lot of insectivore species even in water. So we have, they have bladders to trap. They have, on their roots, they have tiny little bladders, which are the size of, you know, pinheads. They trap insects. So we have at least, you know, 4 species in the Hyderabad region or more, maybe. Some flora has been recorded in, some flora, she was asking, right? Some flora has been recorded from KBR Park. Okay, there's a book actually brought out. It was like a coffee table book. M.V. Ramana, I think, did his some study, and then there is a, but I don't think it's a comprehensive thing, but yeah, there is a book. Yeah. So BSI may have some copies, but I don't know. They said at one time Forest Department had them, but not sure whether it's still in publication. Yeah, not available to purchase though freely, unfortunately. Yes.
Third question. So you were talking about taking it to our garden during your talk. So let's say we have a decent number of crops at home, like some of the homes in Punjab.
Sure. Yeah.
So how can we plant?
You can. Some of them, yeah, some of them will be okay in case you haven't altered the soil there. If you alter the soil, then some will, most won't, especially the herbs. Because what happens is the red soil, they're not used to the red soil and the manure and all of that, right? So they don't want potting mix. They want the poor soil, which is well drained poor soil, which is what they're used to. It should be well drained at any time. Because we tend to have, you know, mix of clay, and then it's like hard and lumpy, and sometimes, you know, water flows very slowly through it. No. Then they don't, you know, they can't tolerate that. So we can, certain hardier species, right, the shrubs, the climbers, we can try planting. And there are people who are actually growing these plants, and, you know, you're trying to rewild specific gardens. You can also plant those grasses. If you have the substrate, perfectly fine. We can try.
There has to be soil on the rock.
So some amount, yes, if you want, I mean, because I have Selaginella growing on a little patch of rock, but that is just a little crust, so that's okay. But if you want something more, like even grasses, you need a little bit of soil. Typically that sandy morum type thing,
Yeah,
you know.
what they call moram.
Yeah.
I guess
But the thing is, in a small area, it's very difficult for that soil to rejuvenate every year, right? Because what is acting in this large area is everything is interconnected. One is acting on the other. So the nutrition that you find there, you'll be hard pressed to get on a small space, in a small space, because it's all coming in from here, there, the wind and the air and all of that, that adds to it. So in a small space, which is cut off from, you know, the larger source, it could be a little difficult, because that's the kind of environment they need. But you can always try. I know Professor Siddharthan has a he has a ceropegia growing in his office that is amazing. In his office, which is slightly air conditioned, on his windowsill.
Soil is collected
From the, yeah. So you need to get the soil from the original place, but still fantastic how that plant is doing. I'm like, wow. So it's possible.
So I noticed that in all your pictures, all the pictures can be shown of the these fauna.
Mm-hmm.
The flowers are very tiny, almond. Is there some?
Yes, see, everything is small, typically, because nutrition is a problem, water is a constraint, nutrition and water, two constraints, right? Secondly, soil. Very soon you will hit, the roots will hit rock, right? So they have to actually find their way in the crevices and all of this. So typically in these places, the trees are stunted, unless the weather, the climate is different, right? So there's a difference. And so in Hyderabad, we are like up there, semi-arid, smack in the middle of the peninsula, so not much moisture coming in from outside. So they can grow big if they're on a coast, right? And you have moisture coming in from the sea and things like that, right? So you'll see huge differences in vegetation. So, but yeah, I mean, I've barely touched the surface over here. There's a lot happening and lots of species. I can't, I mean, as it is, I think I bored you, but so much more I can't, sort of even begin to tell. And there's a lot of different vegetation. You'll see differences in the east of Hyderabad, you'll see differences in the west. West has more Western Ghat species, east has more Eastern Ghat species. You can actually see that. It's amazing. In some places, the plants that I see on the east of Hyderabad are not there on the west. There will be overlaps, but certain particular species you won't see. The ones over here are here and the ones over there. It's fascinating, yeah. But and every area, every rocky outcrop, it's not necessary that it has all the species. So different places I find different species, mixes. It's amazing. So yeah. I mean, if they still exist, you can go on studying them forever. It's like non-stop. It's very fascinating what it throws up. But yeah. And everybody is interdependent. They all, I mean, all those things thrive because they're together. It's not just the ecosystem, but everything else matters as well. And all the interdependencies and intersections and all of that. So it's, yes.
So, if you had to suggest to us a place like Kars, for example,
Mm-hmm.
is there something like that around or in Hyderabad where we can really go and study these things?
Well, it's all fragmented, like you're seeing here. The few spaces which would have been fantastic, even they have undergone fragmentation. Like I told you, in Neopolis, we could have kept that as a wonderful little slice of Hyderabad Central University is a wonderful little slice of thing. It has some fantastic stuff, but it's been disturbed. OU is okay. Where they found the stuff, it was 2010 when they discovered Ledamoria in OU and Damaiguda, which is again that side. But a lot of, I mean, people, human, yeah, disturbance, people walking and all of that, right? University of Hyderabad was a fantastic ecosystem. It's only now it's undergoing a lot of disturbance in various pockets, not just the buildings, but other things, yeah. So these, yeah, they're problematic then. So not one place, but there are in the surrounding areas, like because that's more basalt in the, not surrounding, but more towards the west. You have basalt because the Deccan Traps, there's a little section of Deccan Traps there. So some places can be absolutely stunningly beautiful, not as rich as Kars though, yeah, it's a different, yeah, landscape, but very beautiful. If we are fortunate, we'll go, yeah, Uma.
Just now you said there are plants to find on the western side
Mm-hmm.
of Hyderabad,
Mm-hmm.
and you said that there are plants from the western Ghats on the western
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
How do you explain that? Because we are quite far from either place. Is it geological?
Yes, and they also travel. So they find similar conditions in certain areas, typically soil. So what has happened is some of the trap with the Deccan Trap, I mean, that has given us some, I think some of the plants, some purchase. For example, in University of Hyderabad, there is Curculigo ochioides apparently, which I have not seen elsewhere on the rocky areas, but that grows particularly in black soil, I mean, so trap soils basically. The basalt slowly disintegrates and becomes laterite and black soil. And so there's a little bit of that mix in University of Hyderabad apparently. So, maybe also, that's also possible. Because we do a lot of topsoil movement, right? So that's also a possibility. But yeah, typically I think they just move slowly because from the region, no, plants travel, they tend to travel, they can be moved by birds, wind, all these forces. So yeah, it's funny. It's amazing how it happens, but it does. We need to think about it and find an explanation for that. Okay.
Are you planning to write a book?
Well, sometime maybe, let's see. I always think that, I'm never quite done with this. I'm not an expert. I left my botanizing way back. But yeah, there's a lot going on. Maybe sometime.
Field
Thank you.
guide by Kobita Dass. So I'm sure you all will agree that this is one of the most interesting talks ever. What say?
Yeah.
Clearly, thank you.
Really fantastic.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you, and you imparted so much knowledge to us. We're very grateful. And 4
Botanizer.
questions is no joke. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you for the recording so sincerely. You set it up and throughout you and the gentleman there also. Thank you very much. I thank the German Center and you wonderful people for coming and listening with pin drop silence. We're all absorbing what she was saying, and she's a fantastic communicator. Thank you so much, German Center. Thank you, Kobita.
Thank
And
you
the
so
cat,
much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you.